So, you guys all, I'm sure, know, many of you know, that we're currently at the Plant Protocol doing a 30-day vegan, salt, oil, and sugar-free challenge. And when we were putting together the protocol, when I was putting together the protocol for the challenge, the things that we wanted the challenge to do and the things we wanted the challengers to avoid throughout this 30 days, I was really thinking I wanted to make sure that I wasn't thinking too narrow. And what I mean by that is when people are trying to get healthy, historically, what most of us have done is we like to micromanage our diet and our exercise when it's time to get healthy. And so I know that most people, when they're entering some type of health challenge, when they're entering some type of protocol, when they're hiring some type of health or fitness coach, they're expecting the diet and the exercise to be part of the program, right? That's like the low hanging fruit. That's what we do, right? But when I was putting together the protocol for a 30-day vegan, salt, oil, and sugar free challenge, I wanted to make sure that I included the things that we don't typically consider when it's time to get healthy. Most of us know we got to eat right. We know we got to move. We know we got to drink our water. We know all that stuff. We got to recover. We got to stretch, all of that stuff. However, I believe there are some very crucial elements to health that many people ignore when it comes to optimizing their health, when it comes to getting the weight off and keeping the weight off, when it comes to getting the numbers down, getting off the medication, or prevention, like making sure we're in the best place possible in our health to avoid something, or if we do encounter something, to recover quickly. And so I wanted to make sure, and I do this in Farm to Table too, our plant-based coaching program. I always like to make sure that the protocol is not narrow, like the protocol is not so hyper focused on diet and exercise that we exclude the other elements that plays a major role to our health. And so there's one crucial element that I believe people have historically ignored and not considered when it comes to reaching their health goals, because we have been taught that health is like this really monolithic thing that's just really about diet and exercise, right? I will say the crucial element that people ignore when it's time. Hey, good morning. Good morning, Tracy on Instagram. Good morning, Arlette on YouTube. What up, y'all? I would say the crucial element that most of us have historically ignored that has significantly delayed our progress in our health is pleasure. It's pleasure. So let me break this down to you guys. In our protocol for the 30-day vegan challenge, I wrote out a protocol, and they have two things that I asked them to do in that protocol, right? In our 30-day vegan protocol, they have to, in addition to the diet and exercise and the water and the fiber and all of those fun things, they have to spend at least an hour with someone they love and at least an hour on something they love. One of the most ignored parts of our lives, and one of the things that many of us have failed to do, is prioritizing pleasure. It is my belief that our ignorance, or should I say our ignoring of pleasure in our lives, has kept us unwell for longer than we need to be. We have to start prioritizing pleasure, y'all. We have to make sure pleasure is an integral part of our regimen when it's time to get healthy, when it's time. I did a podcast in 2020, right? So I have a podcast. I've been podcasting for a very long time. And in 2020, I did a specific podcast. I got a lot of listens. And it was very popular with our listeners, which was how I prioritize pleasure. And in that episode, I shared 4 ways that I prioritize pleasure, right? And people love that episode because I gave them a perspective that they never considered, like prioritizing pleasure. No, life is all, because people be taking life real serious, right? No, life is all about working and responsibilities and paying the bills and do the things you're supposed to do and being a good steward of your money and your time and your energy and your gifts. And life is all about getting better and personal development and growth and going after it. And life is, and it's everything so serious and everything is so responsible and all this, it's once we start adulting, we just stay adulting, right? So what I like to say now, and then in a practice, should I say, that I adopted back at the top of 2020, and I've been trying to adhere to it ever since for years, is the importance of prioritizing pleasure and making pleasure an intentional part of my life. So part of the reason that I asked our challengers, we have like over 680 people registered for the challenge that we're doing right now. We have like, we literally just last night or this morning, I don't know when it happened, we have approached 906 people in this Facebook group, our challenge Facebook group, which again, that happened in 17 days. In 17 days, we have gathered 900 people who are interested in health, right? And specifically taking a plant-based approach to health, which I am just so happy about. But that can be a very serious thing. Like, oh my God, I got to give up meat. I got to give up dairy. I got to give up eggs. I got to give up seafood. I got to let it go of salt, oil, and sugar. I got to watch everything. I got to read everything. I got to make sure I understand how to get all my nutrients and all my vitamins and all my minerals, and everything is so serious all the time. So I want to tell you guys two things. I want to tell you guys why it is so important to prioritize pleasure to maximize and optimize your health journey. And I want to tell you a couple of ways that I do it. Okay. So the first is why. Pleasure does something that nothing else in your life can do. Now, let me be clear when I say pleasure. Some of us are addicted to dopamine. Many of us are addicted to dopamine. If you have any type of affinity to a behavior or a substance and you lose self-control in the presence of that behavior or that substance, you probably have an addiction to dopamine. Like doing that thing or eating that thing or engaging in that behavior gives you a dopamine hit. And if you chase that dopamine regularly because it feels so good for that dopamine to flood your pleasure pathway. That is not the type of pleasure I'm talking about today. I want to be clear. Like when you bite into those potato chips or that burger or those fries, right? When you get that notification on your phone for that email or that text message, when you hop on social media, those type of dopamine hits have become so incessant in our lives that they have kind of like clouded our vision about what pleasure and happiness truly is, because most of us, because we have these addictions to these behaviors and these substances, they have become the thing that we chase. And so it is that inorganic pleasure that has taken over most of our lives. But I'm talking about going back to roots. I'm talking about going back to the things that really, that organic pleasure that has lasting power, right? It's not just like a quick dopamine hit. So I'm not talking about these quick instant gratification dopamine hits. That's not the type of pleasure I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about like those, that time that you spend with somebody you care about, where like you don't care what's happening, what else is happening in the world. You're just in the moment and you're laughing, or that love that you have for someone or something in your life. And when you're doing that thing, when you're doing the thing that makes you happy and fills you up, like time doesn't matter, space doesn't matter, like nothing matters. I'm talking about that type of pleasure, right? That type of pleasure is missing. And so why is it important? It's important because, number one, the hormones that it helps us to release really helps to regulate us. So the oxytocin that is created when you hug someone that you love, when you kiss someone you love, when you cuddle with a kid or a pet or your loved one or your spouse, right? That oxytocin that's created from connection and physical intimacy is so healthy for the body and the brain. Those endorphins, that serotonin that's naturally produced, right? When you engage in activities and behaviors and things that genuinely brings you joy and peace, you release all of these hormones and they help to regulate your nervous system. They help to regulate your immune system. All of that is health. So some of us, we're just like, I'm not reaching my health goals. I don't know. What am I not eating? What should I be eating? Lisa, what's a superfood? What's the, like, if there was one tip, if there was one thing you would have me stop eating, what would it be? If there was one thing you would have me start eating, what would it be? What's the best exercise to do? What time should I be doing it? Like, yeah, all of that is cool. But there are things outside of the kitchen and the gym that plays a huge, not a minute, not a small, not a minor, but a huge role in your health. And one of those things is play. I don't know what happened to us in life, but so many of us have disregarded pleasure. Like we now do. I want you guys to like take an audit of your day, take an audit of your week. How often do you do something strictly because it makes you happy? Like, how often are you doing? I want you to take an audit of your week, and I want you to look at everything you do on a day to day basis and everything you choose to do, and how much of it is like a responsibility and a requirement, and how much of it is just because it brings you joy, peace, or happiness. Like, how often are you intentionally making time for things you love or people you love? Like people that you love, people you are in love with. Like, where is the intentional pleasure, right? And so I think it is so important that we understand that it doesn't, like kale and spinach and apples and bananas and green juices don't solve everything. Squats and lunges and barbells and dumbbells won't solve all of our health issues. Some of our nervous systems are so dysregulated because we're always hopping from one responsibility to the next. We're overwhelmed and chronically stressed out, and we're not getting that balance that pleasure intentionally provides. So that is the why. So now let me tell you the how. Let me tell you the how. And this is just some of the ways that I intentionally prioritize pleasure in my life, and that I've been doing for years so that I make sure I have what is considered balance for me. So when I say balance, I'm not talking about 50-50, right? I'm just saying like just the right amount. It's a recipe for your life. You know what I mean? What's the right amount of pleasure that I should be including to make me feel balanced when it comes to all the responsibilities, all the responsible stuff I'm doing all the time, right? And so here's a couple of ways. The first is I started prioritizing pleasure years ago first. So do you prioritize pleasure first? So I have a lot of things that I do like recurringly and repeatedly throughout the year, right? And I remember in 2020 when I was teaching Farm to Table, our plant-based coaching program, I was teaching it 3 to 4 times a year, because at that time Farm to Table was a cohort style program. And so that means that it was a 10 or 12 week program. And so that means about once per quarter, I was teaching this 10-week coaching program. And it was kind of a heavy lift because it was like we had students, we had to enroll, we had to onboard, we had to teach, we had to go through the semester, then we had to offboard, and we had to start all over again. Right. And at that time, I got introduced to this concept of prioritizing pleasure. So what I would do, I remember at the top of 2020, I looked at my year and I was like, okay, I know I want to teach Farm to Table 4 times this year. But what I did first, before deciding on the dates for Farm to Table for that year, I scheduled my vacations. I was like, I know I want to take a vacation after every semester of Farm to Table. So I prioritize my pleasure before my responsibilities. How can you put your pleasure first, as opposed to the way that most of us have traditionally done it, which is we make our responsibilities first and we make our responsibilities priority, and then we hope to fit pleasure in? Let's not do that anymore. So here's a challenge to you. Maybe, I don't know, the rest of your year or the rest of this quarter is already decided. But the next, maybe the fourth quarter of this year, or for the first quarter of 2025, like, how can you prioritize your pleasure and make your responsibilities fit around it as much as possible? Like, schedule pleasure before responsibilities, like in your next week. Like, look at your week next week. Have you prioritized any pleasure next week? Or is everything that you're going to do just like responsible AF? Like, is it just really all about meetings and work and taking care of the babies and taking care of your partners? Or if you're a caregiver, taking care of whoever you're taking care of? Like, how much pleasure is intentionally scheduled into not just your year, like 1 or 2 vacations, but like into your week? I mean, I think it's last weekend or 2 Saturdays ago, like we went to a museum. Like me and a friend, we just went to a museum. Like, okay, I've never been to this museum before. They were in town. They had never been to this museum before. And so we prioritized that. Like, and we actually talked about it. Like, we looked at our schedule and was like, okay, how can we fit this in? I got to do this at this time. You got to do this at this time. And we made it work. Right. And so how can you prioritize pleasure before responsibilities? Like, it's a fundamental shift, but it really changes your life because, and I know, well, I'll tell you how it changed mine. For me, the definition of happiness for me is always having something to look forward to, right? And it's also still finding joy in things that I do repeatedly. So I have like two or three definitions of happiness, but the one that's relevant in this conversation is, for me, joy or happiness is always having something to look forward to. And so the only way I can ensure that is I have to be intentional about creating things to look forward to. Right. And so like I've already like at the end of July, I'm like, I haven't taken days off in a while. I know I need to be better at taking time off from work. So I've already scheduled 5 days off of work for the end of July. Like July 20th to the 25th, I got to literally fly out of town, I think on the 25th. So I probably should do like the 19th to the 24th. But I've already scheduled, blocked that time off on my schedule, on my calendar for the end of July. How can we intentionally prioritize pleasure? Pleasure is missing from your health regimen. Pleasure is missing from a lot of you guys because so many of us, we get these short-term dopamine hits from social media and from food and from substances and from gossiping and from scrolling, that we are confusing those little brief inorganic moments of happiness. We're confusing them with what really matters, which is our organic, more drawn out, intentional moments of happiness and pleasure. So that's the first way, is I prioritize pleasure over responsibilities as often as possible. So that could look like scheduling vacations and time away, a year in advance, or it can look like looking at my upcoming week and saying, okay, you know what? Like I don't have a dinner with a friend on here. I don't have like a outing on here. I don't have just time off to sit around my house and do nothing intentionally. Like what makes you happy? Like I literally looked at the weather for this week, and the weather here is going to be hot AF, right? It's like in the 90s every day. And so I'm like, okay, I got a sun allergy. It's going to be hot AF. I know I can't go outside for the overwhelming majority of the day. So for me, I'm like, for this week, literally my plan was, because I like being outside, it's like, okay, I literally scheduled my week so that every day this week I could go outside at like 7 a.m. in the morning so that I beat the sun, but I don't, get cabin fever. So I prioritize pleasure. For me, walking by the water, being outside, being in nature, by the grass and the greenery and seeing people, even though I don't talk to them, makes me happy, right? And so I prioritize just that small little bit of pleasure this week by making sure I knew the weather, because I would go outside in the evening, but I'm like 7 p.m. It's still going to be 90 degrees. That's too hot for me. I don't want to get a heat rash. So let me go out at 7 a.m., right? So I prioritize pleasure for the week. And then I was so mad, y'all, because then I woke up this morning, it's literally pouring rain. So I couldn't go this morning. So I had to go to the gym just regular this morning because it was like pouring rain. I'm like, that wasn't on the forecast. But how do you prioritize pleasure? So that's one way that I do it. I prioritize it over everything. Okay. Now, the second way that you can prioritize pleasure in your life to enhance your immune system, enhance and regulate your nervous system so that you can get healthy quicker, is by being in service to others. Being in service really brings a lot of pleasure to us. Number one, it really helps us to get out of our own way and out of our own head. Like a lot of times, especially if we got stuff in our life that we're just like unhappy about in this season, some of us have a tendency to get overconsumed with our own issues and our challenges and what we perceive as problems, right? Because by the way, like problems and stress is almost always our perception of the circumstance, not the circumstance itself. It's just our perception of our circumstance, but that's another conversation. So how can we be in service? A lot of times, like organic pleasure, like if you want a real organic dopamine hit that like really can serve you at a high level, as opposed to like potato chips and like reality TV, try being in service to somebody, and try being in service to someone in something that you are struggling with yourself, or something that you have mastered. So make it relevant to you. Like you have mastery over something that somebody else is struggling with. How can you be in service? Or you're actually struggling with something and you're so overconsumed by how to get out of your own circumstance. Find someone who's having the exact same challenge and help them with that. Like it is so being in service is so cathartic and so healing. And many of you guys know this intellectually. I know I'm talking to really smart people. So you guys know this intellectually, but as far as putting it in practice, how can you be in service to other people intentionally? Just like you want to prioritize pleasure, prioritize service. So how can you schedule service in this week or next month or next quarter? How can you, like for me, being in service. Now, I'll admit this comes really easy for me because I have mastery in a skill set that a crap ton of people need. Like I have mastery over nutrition science, mastery over lifestyle science, mastery over behavior change. So I can teach beliefs easily. I can teach plant-based living easily. I can teach entrepreneurship pretty easily. And so I have mastery over subjects that are really, really needed and in demand. So it is nothing for me to just be like, give away some time. Like I did it recently. I was teaching entrepreneurship. I was teaching coaching. I was teaching a lesson to this group of coaches. And I offered like an assessment to them to help with their coaching business. And then I was like, and you know what? At the end of the assessment, just book a private call with me, 20, 30 minutes, and let's dissect your assessment and let's see how I can help you in your coaching business. And I had like several of them book calls with me and I didn't charge anything. Not only did I not charge anything, I didn't make an offer at the end of the call. It wasn't even a setup, right? For an offer. It was strictly like, I just want to be in service to help your coaching business. And so it's easy for me to be in service based on what I naturally do, right? So it's what I charge for, I can also at any given moment give away. And so can you. You currently charge for? Like, what do you charge your job for? Like your job pays you in exchange for what? And how can you use that and say, you know what? Like it can be an and. It doesn't have to be an either or. It doesn't have to be either I work for free or I charge for this. Like it can be an and. I charge for this and I work for free. And that's what I do. I charge for health coaching. I charge for business coaching. I charge for personal development and I do it for free. I do. Right? It doesn't have to be like, oh my God, once you monetize something, you never do it for free again. So how can you be in service? That brings so much pleasure. Y'all already know this. We know being in service is so mutually beneficial. We try to make it like it shouldn't be. Like, no, I just help for the sake of helping. And it's a completely selfless act. It's not. Being in service is not a completely selfless act. So once we all admit that, we can get more pleasure out of it by admitting that it makes us feel good to do good. I don't understand why that's so bad to say, but it makes us feel good to do good. Like we're not supposed to tell anybody. I get it, but sometimes the story makes sense for the lesson you teaching. Okay. So I'm in service all the time and it makes me feel good. And again, you get that healthy dose of oxytocin and dopamine, right? As opposed to that unhealthy dose when it comes from engaging in self-destructive pleasure-seeking behaviors like bad eating and all of that stuff, right? But you get a healthy dose of those hormones, of those neurotransmitters, and it really helps to regulate nervous system. It really helps to raise your vibrational frequency, and all of those are healing modalities. Okay. Now, let me tell you the next one. I have two more ways that we're going to get out of here. So another way that I prioritize pleasure. Some of you guys need to hear this one, and it's going to be the number one for you. For many of you, especially those of you who are currently disobedient in your life, pleasure for you, the majority of the pleasure for you is not going to come from starting something. Okay. From starting to do something like start being in service, start prioritizing pleasure on your calendar first. For those of you, especially those of you who are disobedient, the overwhelming amount of pleasure in your life in this season for you is going to come from you stopping something. Lean in if you're disobedient in your life right now and you know you're disobedient. Your pleasure can come quickly by stopping something you're currently doing. All pleasure doesn't come from doing something like going to a museum or making dinner time with a good friend. For some of you, your pleasure is going to come from stopping something. Stop all that disobedience. Like stop, create the exit strategy from the thing you're being disobedient in, right? For many of you, your pleasure will come when you stop being disobedient, right? When you stop engage, like when you stop doing a thing that you have lost interest in a long time ago. I had a student right now. She's in my mastermind, my personal development mastermind. But last year, she was in my mastermind last year too. And one of the things we were working on for her last year is she had kind of outgrown her place in ministry at her church, and it was killing her a little bit. But it felt like the right thing to keep doing because it's ministry. It's ministry, right? And so it's like you can't stopping volunteering at God's house. You know what I mean? And so that's what it felt like. So there was like this guilt and this like this cognitive dissonance that was coming with her, like no longer being satisfied with her place in ministry. And it took her a while, it took her months. She has finally disconnected from it and finally, opted into pleasure. But she had to stop doing something to get pleasure. And that's a lot for many of us, right? At the point that the ministry stopped being mutually beneficial, it turned into disobedience. And it was hard for her to be obedient to what she was feeling intuitively, right? Because being in service in ministry seems like the right thing to do. But you get to be in service and satisfied at the same time. Service doesn't have to be dissatisfying. You get to choose how you want to be in service. I remember I joined another church recently. I think it was like in the beginning of this year or the end of last year. And they asked, is there a certain ministry that you want to volunteer for? And I was like, yeah, the health and wellness ministry. Like I'm trying to, get the church healthy. I want to talk about nutrition. I want to talk about just like chronic disease prevention and reversal. Like I want to volunteer for the health ministry at this new church. And so somebody from the church, an administrator from the church, emailed me. And she asked about ministry again or something. I was like, or maybe I emailed them and I was like, hey, y'all just sent out an email about all the different things that we can volunteer in, but I don't see anything about health and wellness. Is there a health and wellness ministry? Right. And she emailed me back and she's like, oh, we don't have a health and wellness ministry. Right. And she was like, is that the how you want to serve? Is that the place you want to? And I was like, yes. And she's like, is there anything else you want to do? And I'm like, no. I'm not interested in volunteering at this church if it's not in this ministry. Now, that might sound wrong to some people, but the thought of anything else made me miserable. Like the thought of being an usher made me miserable. The thought of I don't know, what are all the stuff you can do in the church. But I didn't want to do none of it. Like none of it sounded appealing to me. I'm not really a huge people person, so I didn't want to talk and greet people. I didn't want to be on the I didn't want to do anything else. I only wanted to do what I knew I was great at and what I knew would make me happy and then what I knew I could genuinely look forward to. Right. And that's one of the ways you prioritize pleasure, by literally prioritize, like even in service, you get to choose. Even in service, you get to choose. Right. So some of us need to stop doing certain things in order to get pleasure out of our lives. Pleasure, or the lack thereof, is keeping a lot of us sick. A lot of us. Right. And so we're like, everything is diet and exercise with our health. It's not. Pleasure is missing from your regimen. Where are you getting filled up? Like, where are you? Like, when are you taking off your adulting hat and just being in a moment and doing the things that make you happy, that regulate your nervous system, is so important. So some of you, especially those of you who are disobedient, need to stop doing some things in order to get pleasure back. Like if your job is the source of your misery, if your relationships are the source of your misery, if your friendships, if your family relationships are the source of your misery, if that thing that you currently volunteer for that once upon a time was meaningful, but you have outgrown it, and that's the source of your misery. If you're avoiding a tough conversation and that's the source of your misery, stop avoiding the tough conversations. Some of y'all need to stop doing some things, and you will find more pleasure. You will extract more joy out of life. Okay. Now let me get into the last one before I get up out of here. Yes, Majida on Facebook said pleasure is missing from your regimen. I promise you that, and that is why I built the challenge protocol the way I did. And I reminded our challengers in a recent live class, like, are you guys spending an hour with someone you love and an hour on something you love? Don't think that I'm, so typecast about a plant-based lifestyle so much that I believe that plant solution to everything. It's not. I mean, lentils are so medicinal, so are chickpeas, but baby, they will not solve the problem of you lacking love and connection in your life. You have to you have to seek out pleasure. Okay. All right. And the final thing that I do in order to prioritize pleasure and make sure I'm balanced in that way in my life is I act up. Let me, I act up. Let me tell y'all something. Okay. I have a colleague, he's a friend now, and we're in the same mastermind, right? And so me and him, we're in the same mastermind. And so we've just over time, over the last several months, developed like this friendly, like brother, sister, mini feud, right? If you will. And so recently we were at a mastermind meeting, right? And somebody mentioned my name in their mastermind because they were talking about health. And he called me a bully in front of these people in the mastermind, right? And I was like, oh no, he didn't, right? And it was funny. And I was like, okay, all right, payback is a coming. Okay. So he called me a bully in front of our fellow colleagues in the mastermind. And some of the mastermind was new, right? And so some of these people didn't know me yet. Like most of the people in mastermind, they know me, but we had a lot of new people in this particular meeting and they didn't know me. I said, oh, that's what we doing? Okay. And so I remember a couple of days later, I was like sitting on my couch and I was literally bored. And I was like, I'm bored and I'm in the mood to act up. Right. And I was like, how can I give myself a beautiful dopamine hit right quick? So I went on my Facebook, I went on my Instagram, and I made a post about him. And I decided to publicly out him and talk some junk about him because I knew all our mastermind friends would see it. And it will be a whole thing, right? So I went on my Facebook page and I went on my Instagram page and I talked about how his wife can lift him over her head and how he's trying to work on his calf muscles and they'll never grow. It was so petty. It was the most pettiest thing and it made me so happy. Some of y'all don't act up enough for me. Like act up. Melissa know what I'm talking about on Instagram, right? She knows exactly who I'm talking about. She's in our mastermind. And so another way you can get more pleasure out of life is some of y'all need to just start acting up. Some of y'all just need to start having fun. Like there's no other motive. There's nothing responsible that's about to happen here. Cause most of you guys who follow me on social media, my posts be like yelling at y'all. Did you eat like you had some sense today? Like I'm trying to teach something. I'm trying to coach to something, but sometimes you just up. Sometimes you just got to say something because it's funny. Sometimes you got to do something. Sometimes you got to tease somebody. Sometimes you got to prank somebody. Like some of y'all don't have enough act up in y'all life. Like some of y'all are too grown for your own good. Everything don't have to be responsible. Everything don't have to be serious. When's the last time you just acted up? Like if you ever just got with a girlfriend and just didn't, when's the last time you just decided not to act your age? Right. And it's so fun having this feud with him because we're both like super similar, like in our personalities, but even like in our intellect and our seriousness, we have so much in common. We're such the same in that way. And so for me to pull him out of his character and get him to acting up, him pull me out of my character and I got to acting up. Right. And it's just like, when's the last time picked on somebody that you love? Just like being childish. Like I be so childish sometimes with my friends, like around the house, running, acting goofy. Like, why y'all ain't acting up? Do you understand the pleasure in just being goofy? Like I was talking to my best friend recently. So I was over her house recently, just a couple of days ago, right? Cause pleasure. And we were talking about how goofy we were, but how goofy is not what we lead with, right? So most people, one of the things I have heard historically in my career and just in my life from many people across many different areas of my life is how intimidating I am, right? So people really intimidating. And I don't care. Like I embrace it. There was a brief moment in my life where I tried to change it. Like, oh, I don't want to be intimidated. Now I just don't care. I'm like, bro, that's a you problem, not a me problem. I can't help that all this mastery and all this greatness is upon you. You know what I mean? Like, what you want me to do? Okay. So move your seat if you're intimidated. I don't know what else to tell you. Just don't sit at my table. So but there was a time I tried to change it, right? And so what happens is that's usually what leads when people meet me, when they hear me, right? It's like, she's so intimidating, she's so confident, whatever. And it's all true. Like it's true. And I'm like, oh well. So it usually takes a certain level of intimacy before people know how goofy I am, right? Like people don't know how much I act up. Like they don't know. So number one is usually like a shock or surprise, a pleasant surprise. Like, Lisa, you silly AF, you goofy as heck. And I'm like, yeah. And that's an intimate part of me that I don't let a lot of people into, right? And not intentionally. It's not like, oh, I got this wall up. It's just that that's not how I lead when I'm developing relationships with people. It's just not naturally. That's just not what I lead with. And so my goofiness is usually reserved, right, for a certain ecosystem or once our relationship gets to a certain level. And then it's like, I don't even know who you are, right? And so when people experience that goofiness, like it's a big deal and it's meaningful for me because it means I've really let you in, right? And so the act up, me and my best friend were talking and she was talking about her, she's exactly like me, like her goofiness is not revealed on the first date, right? And she was talking about how her coworkers were recently telling her like how scared of her they were initially and how pleasantly surprised they were to find out she was a goofball, right? And I think that is so dope, right? It's like you get to choose when and how you want to act up. Like you don't have to lead with that. You don't have to be the class clown. You don't have to like force it. But if you have that inside of you and you have suppressed it, I want to invite you to bring it back up. Like I have a client in my mastermind who I had no idea till we started doing our in-person retreats how goofy she was. And I'm just like, she's the life of the party. She dances around, but she doesn't present that way traditionally in our mastermind. But when we got in person and we all just started letting our hair down and getting a little more personable, she was so goofy. And I'm like, I love this. And so for those of you who have maybe suppress that because life just required you to be super responsible and be more serious, or life told you that you had to be, or maybe I have people like this in my life. Maybe you had someone close to you in your life who made it uncomfortable for you to show up as you were. Like I have a close friend and he literally, talked about like his ex kind of made him suppress who he naturally was, made him suppress his goofiness, right? And so I want to invite you guys to, number one, make it okay and comfortable for other people to be that way in front of you, right? But then also, if you have that in you, invite it back to the party. Start acting up. Like if for some reason, when we became adults, we literally put away our childish ways. And I know it's, the Bible tells us to, but like, I need you guys, some of you guys need to reintroduce it because that's where your pleasure is. Your pleasure is in your childishness. Your pleasure is in teasing and pranking a good friend on social media publicly, just like mine is, right? Like we have to start acting up more. Like we have to stop being so serious. Everything doesn't have to be a responsible decision. Like everything doesn't have to make sense logically. Some things can just make sense because they feel right and they bring you joy. So that will be the one thing that I believe is missing from most people's health regimen is just like really pleasure. Like we're not prioritizing pleasure. We're not intentionally stopping doing the things that has snatched our pleasure, right? The things that are bringing you the most misery, the most grief, the most unhappiness, the things that you dread, the things that you're doing where you watch the clock. I want you to formulate a plan and get those things all out of your life as quickly as possible. If you have to watch the clock the whole time you're doing it, it's usually a good indicator that there needs to be an exit strategy. And even if that's a workout, like if the type of workout you're doing forces you to watch the clock the whole time, you're not getting enough pleasure out of it. If your job, all you're doing is looking at the clock the entire time, you're not getting enough pleasure out of it, right? If spending time with that, if those people or volunteering in that role feels so obligatory that you have to watch the clock the whole time, you're not getting enough pleasure out of it. And so I invite you to create an exit strategy from the things that are diminishing your pleasure in life, because it is causing your nervous system to be overactive. It's compromising your immune that weight on you, is keeping your blood pressure high. It is doing you a disservice when it comes to your health goals. Okay. So for many of us, that's what's missing in our journey. It's pleasure. It's more pleasure. It's lots of pleasure. It's prioritizing pleasure. And so I hope the tips that I personally use in my life have helped you today so that you can get more pleasure back. You can lean more into obedience here, and you can start seeing things change in your health permanently once and for all. Because what happens when we micromanage diet and exercise when it comes to our health is we actually can get results. And that's what fools us into thinking that that's the strategy. The fact that we can get results by only micromanaging diet and exercise kind of fools us into believing that diet and exercise are the only thing that need to be micromanaged, because you can lose some weight, right? Your numbers can go down. You can start feeling slightly better. But the question is, can I sustain the result? And if you're not sustaining the results of micromanaging your diet and exercise, and that usually means there's some pieces that are missing. If you find the weight eventually comes back on, if you find you keep turning back to emotional eating, even though you were able to discipline yourself for a 30-day challenge, if you find you keep reverting back to the things that caused you to be unwell, then you need to start looking outside of the gym and outside of the kitchen. And one of those places to look is, am I prioritizing pleasure in my life? Do I seek out pleasurable experiences? Do I intentionally engage in pleasurable experiences? Like, is this something that I have made a big deal for me, or am I just adulting all the damn time? Like, let it go. Y'all got to start acting up. Y'all got to start acting up. I'm sorry. Go be petty today. That's my best advice. Go be petty on somebody today. Like, go tickle somebody today. I don't know. Just go act up and watch how it changes things. Okay. Carmel on Instagram said, the reminder is appreciated. Yes. Yes. Oh, Majida said, this is what another coach of mine preaches, prioritizing pleasure. Yes, absolutely. What y'all saying on YouTube? Brianna laughing at me. Start acting up. But coach, we were taught all our lives to be well behaved. Ain't that crazy? The lies they told, like, lose your behavior for the rest of the year and let's see how quickly we can reach your health goals, right? Lose your behavior. Get goofy. Get goofy, okay? And watch things change for you, okay? Kiwi said it's about to go down, and I'm telling you it's your fault. Telling them it's your fault. Oh my gosh, I hope so. Tell them I sent you. When you go messing with somebody and you start getting on their nerves, but they can't stop laughing, tell them I sent you. Tell them I sent you. And watch y'all just have a good moment and create a good memory. It's just so exciting, okay? So y'all act up. Get some act up in your system, all right? That's it, and that's all for me. Listen, the Plant Protocol 30-day vegan salt, oil, and sugar-free challenge is fully underway, y'all. We just reached our halfway mark on June 15th, and so now we're like riding out these final couple of weeks. I can't even believe, like, the results are phenomenal. So if you guys are not in my 30-day vegan challenge, first of all, we got a Facebook group with over 900 people in less than a month. Okay. We have over 600 and some people registered for this challenge. We have live class twice a week. And I've just been enjoying this so much. Talking about pleasure, y'all. I've been enjoying this so much. Just listening to the results, watching people really do the hard work of stop eating the mess that has been keeping them sick. Watching, they're putting in our Facebook group, them spending time with people they love. They're putting in our Facebook group the things that they're doing that they love. And it makes me so happy. I feel so honored that God gave me this assignment. So if you're not in our challenge, it ain't too late to join. Like, just get in the ecosystem alone, because it ain't like when June 30th comes, like, the ecosystem is not going to be shut down. Like, they don't even know. I haven't even told them yet. Like, but we about to go crazy for these next several months until we do the challenge again in December, January. So anyway, if y'all not in a challenge, get in the ecosystem. If you're not in our free Facebook group, the Plant Protocol 30-day vegan SOS free challenge, if you're not registered, you might want to get in this thing, because even after the challenge, we have so much more planned for our challenge, because we understand that this is really a lifestyle change, and we want to make sure that we honor that for our challengers. And so you guys for listening. That's all for me today. Next Monday, you know what? I'm going to come up with my topic like now, like in the next couple of days, because next Monday, next weekend, this upcoming weekend, I'm in DC, And so I want to make sure Monday morning I'm ready for you guys. So I'm about to premeditate on what we're going to talk about next Monday. And I'm going to schedule that on my Instagram and on YouTube here, so we can have a really juicy conversation next Monday morning. So I can't wait to see you guys back here, same time, same place. Share this episode with somebody who needs to prioritize pleasure. Tell them to stop being serious all the time. Stop taking life so serious. Tell them to stop being disobedient, and tell them to start prioritizing pleasure over responsibilities despite what they've been taught. Shout out to Brianna. Okay, until next time, you guys have an absolutely phenomenal week. Love y'all. Bye.